All right, we are joined now by Seahawks draft blog Rob Staten on the Emerald Queen Casino Book Sportsbook Hotline. How we doing, man?
Really good, Michael. How are you?
We're doing okay considering the performance that Sam Darnold had this week. And Rob, I felt so bad for the dude because this was what you're trying to avoid all year. Me personally, I still think he's going to be fine. I think he can bounce back from this. But what were your initial thoughts as you're seeing interception after interception?
I think, like you say, really disappointed for him because he has come on such a journey in his career and he's got to a point now in Seattle where people are looking at him and thinking he's turned a corner and that he's in the MVP race, and then it all comes crashing down in one game. And because the defense played so well, it's very easy to point the finger solely at him and say, well, the Seahawks would have won even if he'd only thrown 3 interceptions instead of 4. Like, then maybe the Seahawks would have won that game. So there's going to be a lot of a focus and attention on him now. Anytime the Seahawks play a big game, whether that's going to be the rematch against the Rams, if it's even going to be against the Colts, if it's going to be in the playoffs down the line, the narrative is going to be, is the same thing going to happen again? Is Sam Darnold going to be able to play a lot better than he did in that game? I think the thing that we need to have a bit of perspective on, though, is this happens to really good quarterbacks all of the time. So I had a little look. So Peyton Manning had 5 games in his career where he threw 4 interceptions. He even had a 6-interception game in his career. Peyton Manning. Matthew Stafford has had 4 games in his career where he's thrown 4 interceptions. Tom Brady had 6 games in his career where he threw 4 interceptions. So good quarterbacks can have games like this. They can have a meltdown performance. The key is how you respond. So let's see how Sam Darnold's going to respond, not just in the next 3 games, but then after that, when the Rams come to Seattle and they have that rematch.
You know, Rob, I did the same thing. I went and saw Lamar Jackson had one, Purdy had one recently, golf. I'm trying to like give him some confidence as if he needs it from me. But I did the same thing you did. But let's talk about this defense, man. It was impressive what they were able to do against a Matthew Stafford who entered this game with 20 touchdowns, no interceptions. They didn't really run the football effectively. What'd you like about this defense?
Everything. How could you not like everything? Like, the start of the game was a bit weird, that they got that great 4th down stop and then the offense just gave the ball straight back to the Rams. They were able to get a touchdown. They started off running the ball quite well, which was ominous, but then Seattle just took that away. And Stafford, in fairness, looked a little bit flustered. I think it would have been interesting to see if the Seahawks had actually got a lead in that game, whether the Rams could have done things differently, whether they would have had to force the issue a little bit more, and whether they would have been able to handle that. Because it was like 135 yards, something like that, for Matthew Stafford in a game when every single week he's just looked unstoppable. It's been the MVP leader. I genuinely think after that game, with the way that he played, yes, he avoided the mistakes, didn't really have to do too much. They were ahead quite early on. I think after that game, Jonathan Taylor, for me, looks like he should be the MVP favorite instead of Matthew Stafford, because that was his first real test since week 1 against a serious defense when they played the Texans in week 1 and they played the Seahawks last weekend. And in neither of those games, he's not been that spectacular. He has been able to perform very well against some struggling opponents. So I think the all credit to the Seattle defense. They're continuing to play very, very well. There's so much delight. That looks to me like a championship defense. And now all we need is the offense to get over this performance, get back on track. And if they can pair that up in the next few weeks and get some momentum going into the postseason, then Seattle will have a shot, because this defense is a top-notch defense.
Still some positive with his offense too, right? You got JSN that goes for 105 going into this game. We're looking at Oluwatimi. How's he going to do? You did lose Zabel. Sounds like he's going to be okay. But let's focus on JSN. How is he able to, even in a game where it feels like this offense is struggling, how is he able to still go for 105?
I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for you, because he's not the biggest receiver, is he? He's not 6'4". He's not going to run a 4.25 40. He just makes everything look so easy. That's the natural talent of this man is so impressive, because he is calm, he's composed, but he never seems to be 2 up or 2 down. Like, he just runs his routes. People find it very hard to cover him. He's got a natural instinct in a way to get open. His movements seem very subtle, and he's reliable. That one-handed catch that he made, just how do you make a catch like that? It's just unbelievable. The man should be. If we go back to the scenario I was talking about, let's say that Jonathan Taylor ended up being the MVP. Jackson Smith and Jigba should be Offensive Player of the Year. And it shouldn't even be a debate for me. Now, if Matt Stafford wins MVP or somebody else, there's a good chance that Jonathan Taylor will win Offensive Player of the Year. But he's on cue to break the 2,000-yard barrier for receivers, to be the first ever player to do that. I was asked a question on a different show last week. Is it likely that he's going to break this record? And I said, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for me, there's no doubt. If he stays healthy, he's going to get to 2,000 yards because there's just this inevitability about him. It doesn't matter what coverage you have, what plan you come into the game, Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to get his yards. And he is playing, if you were to pick sort of the 10 best players at any position in the NFL this season, you'd have to put JSN amongst those 10.
Yeah, and he's gonna clearly break the franchise record maybe in a couple of weeks at 1,303 yards over here for the Seahawks, which is ridiculous. Let's talk about this O-line. How did you feel they performed? No sacks given up. Olu, I felt like, did okay, and Zaba went down late.
Well, the thing with an offensive line is unless they play perfectly, unless they play like the 2014 Cowboys, there's always going to be like something that you can point a finger at. And,
right.
We've all seen it every single week. There is a snap or two where Anthony Bradford maybe doesn't do something perfectly, and he's getting a lot of criticism for that. What I would say is that just consider how far we've come from a year ago, where every single week the offensive line was a talking point with fans and in the media. It was just not functioning. The offense could not function because of the offensive line. To have another game where there's no sacks, to have another game where, quite frankly, Sam Darnold did not throw those interceptions because he was just under relentless pressure. It was mistakes on his behalf, not maybe using enough anticipation with those throws, forcing things a little bit too much. That gunslinger mentality, which has been so good at times this year, came back to bite him in this game. It's not because of the offensive line. Now, if you could have said at the start of this season, what's the one thing as someone who watches the Seahawks that you would want to see as a big improvement this year, I think most people would have said, I want to see a better offensive line. That's exactly what you've got. And that Gray Zabel news, I must have been a few people who were celebrating like the Seahawks had won a game yesterday when Mike McDonald came out and said they've dodged one there in that it's not a serious injury. It's week to week. That's really positive news. They need to get him back on the field as soon as possible. This is majorly encouraging, not just for this season, but for the future. You now have at least 3 building block young players for your offensive line. There's still a chance that whether it's Olu, whether it's Sundell, maybe even Anthony Bradford, I'm not going to completely rule that one out, could also be part of a young core for the future. And the one thing the Seahawks have never had in my time following the team is consistency up front. They change the center every year. They've had a different center for the last 5 years. Eventually, you've got to put some roots down. You've got to have a line that knows each other. They know their teammates. They know how they're going to work. They're working 5 as 1. So it looks as if they're getting into that place now. And this is just possibly the most important thing from this season, whatever happens the rest of the way.
All right, let's talk big picture now. I have to remind myself, Rob, this team is still 7-3. I know that loss hurts, but you're 7-3. You got Tennessee this weekend. You're probably going to go to 8-3. You're in the wild card spot. Did this game change the way that you view this team and your expectations for them?
No, absolutely not. I've always kind of felt that the Rams and the Seahawks are probably going to split these two games. It was the national radio game that we were covering for the BBC this week. And they asked me for a prediction before, and I said, look, one way or another, I think it's going to be 1-on-1 between the Seahawks and the Rams this year. They're both really good teams. It's a bit of a sitting on the fence answer when you sort of go with a prediction there, but I do think that they're good enough that they're going to split this series. So the fact that the Rams have won this one by 2 points, even when the Seahawks threw 4 interceptions, to me, makes me feel very confident that when they play again on Thursday Night Football in a few weeks' time, the Seahawks will win this game. I think the main thing for me, and this is the one thing that bothers me the most about not winning this game. It's not the Sam Darnold 4 interceptions. I think he'll come over that. And that Ernest Jones post-game interview was absolutely exceptional, by the way. He said everything that needed to be said to draw a line under it as much as you could. And the fact that I've been watching national conversations about Darnold's performance and they've been going to Ernest Jones' press conference and spending 5 minutes on that instead of talking about Darnold shows what an amazing teammate and what an amazing job that was with that press conference. But the main thing for me is they're still looking for a signature win. If you look at the last 2 years, here are the teams that they lost to last year. Detroit, Buffalo, the Rams, the Packers, the Vikings. All of those teams made the playoffs. And they split with the Niners, who were 6-11 but had a whole bunch of injuries. There wasn't a signature win last year. And so far this season, their 3 losses are against the Niners, the Buccaneers, and the Rams. Eventually, they're going to have to play a team, preferably in the NFC, who is a contender, that's a guaranteed playoff team, and they're going to have to win one of these games. It's really good that they're blowing out the Saints and the Cardinals and teams like that. They've got to beat somebody like the Rams. They've got to beat somebody like the 49ers, the Buccaneers, the Packers, the Lions. They're going to get an opportunity to do that when they play the Colts and obviously play the Rams down the line and then the Niners again to finish the season. And then they're going to have the playoffs. That's the next step for this team. They've got to beat a really good contender to show, yes, we belong in the conversation for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You got to prove yourself against the big dogs is what I say. There's a piece to this team that hasn't really been unlocked yet. You kind of see what they're trying to do with Rashid Shaheed. What have you seen out of him, and how do you think they get the most out of him?
Yeah, I want to see him throw it downfield a bit more. Some of those interceptions, there was something that Mike McDaniel, the Dolphins coach, said when the Dolphins beat the Bills. And they asked him about Tua Tagovailoa throwing 2 interceptions. And he said, yeah, do you know what? It was 3rd and long. And I just asked him to throw the ball downfield. And if it gets picked off, it's basically an arm punt. And if you make a big play, you get a pass interference flag. It's a huge moment. Now, if Sam Darnold, if a couple of those interceptions at the weekend where, do you know what? It's 3rd down. Let's just launch this downfield to Rashid Shaheed and see if he can run underneath it and make a big play or get penalized. If there's a flag, then you're downfield anyway. That's kind of tolerable. That's the one thing I want to see so far. Just use his speed. They're using him a lot at the line of scrimmage at the moment. Let's see him just run past somebody and see if he can make a big play downfield like we saw for the Saints this year. The disappointing thing is he was so close to a touchdown at the weekend.
Yeah.
And that is an amazing play by Emmanuel Forbes. That recovery and the long arms. His arms were just they were like as long as a leg, to get out there and flick that ball away from Shaheed. And if that is scored, maybe it's a different game. I mean, it's the same with the Ken Walker touchdown that was called back on the hole. If one of those touchdowns is scored, we might be sat here reflecting on a huge Seahawks win at the weekend. So fine margins. I'm interested to see with the teams that they're playing in the next 3 weeks whether he can have a one game where he can really bust things open here and have a big play downfield.
They say game of inches, man, and that was it right there. A couple more inches, and Shaheed has his first touchdown as a Seahawk. Let's check in on Pete Carroll, man. I'm concerned for Pete, man. You saw that game last night. Geno Smith, 14 yards rushing, leading rusher of that team. We know what the Cowboys can do. Good offensive team, right? But it just does not look good in Las Vegas right now.
Raiders are a mess. They're a complete disaster. And I was watching that game, and that's not a Pete Carroll team. Pete Carroll is not running the ball 3 times in the first half and throwing it, 22 times or something like that. And you look at the end, and you've drafted a running back 6th overall, and he's run the ball 6 times in the game. That's not Pete Carroll football. And it makes me think that, look, Tom Brady has obviously got connections to Bill Belichick. Chip Kelly and Bill Belichick are very close. I genuinely think that Chip Kelly as offensive coordinator hire was a Brady thing rather than a Pete Carroll thing. And I don't think that they're seeing eye to eye on that. Now, Pete Carroll said all the right things after the game about, blame it on me. This is my idea. We wanted to play action and throw it all over the park. That's not a Pete Carroll team. Geno Smith is struggling. He's still throwing interceptions. It's certainly not all his fault. The Raiders roster does not look good enough. But it is quite sad to see. Pete Carroll has gone there probably thinking, I'm going to get the band back together, bring some familiar faces in, and maybe even show the Seahawks what they're missing. And it's gone completely wrong to the point that you kind of wonder whether this is going to be a one and done for Geno and Pete Carroll in Las Vegas. And I'm keeping a close eye on it because there's 1 or 2 players. If the Raiders want to blow things up in the offseason and sort of rebuild and try and get some picks into that organization, there's a couple of players, one of them Max Crosby, and I very much doubt they would trade Brock Bowers, but there's a couple of players there that I'd be picking up the phone and finding out whether Tom Brady wants some of these draft picks for 2026, 2027, because there's a couple of good players there that the Seahawks could really use next year if they were open for business.
I'm with you 100%, man. It's our weekly visit with Rob Staten. Rob, man, we appreciate you. Talk to you next week.
Thanks, man. See you next week.